Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganasadrisam Tattvamasyaadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Okay, we are reading Vivekachudamani, studying it, and it seems we're on verse 437 approximately. Does that sound right? This is Swami Turiyananda's commentary. Okay. And here I believe he is telling us about the state of the Jeevan Muktha. It's interesting that in the hallmarks of Jeevan Muktha, the ideal that Vedanta puts before us is, it's not enough for us. The challenge, of course, is to discover our spiritual nature, but it's not enough to do that. That at first, that itself might seem like a lifetime's work, and indeed it is, perhaps the work of many lifetimes. But apprehending that for oneself is not the culmination of spiritual life. It is to be able to translate that understanding, that awareness, that experience into our every action. Life doesn't end with the experience of spiritual truth. It is the challenge that's put in front of us is realize your true nature, realize that truth, but then translate it into action. Sri Ramakrishna told Swami Vivekananda, I want you to see God with eyes open. So this is a very important ideal in Vedanta, the Jeevan Mukta. Free while living means with the light of that knowledge, that experience, now behave in the world, interact with the world. As we know in the Gita, we also say this, that if any kind of vision or spiritual experience is the end, then Gita should have ended with the Visurupa Darsana. But it doesn't. There's still a whole long part of the Gita that's left where it has how now in the light of that, now that you have seen what is the truth, how should you act? Your duty is still in front of you. That cosmic form was already showing those that who you have to act against, their destiny is already written in a way. And yet he says, still it is your duty, your action, your responsibility to now do what you have to do. So this is a really remarkable insight. If it in tracing Vedantic thought, if you see that there's several really remarkable plateaus that are reached. The first is to dare to say that I as a human being, or you as a human being, are not what you see and feel. Your physical body is something that you possess, you have, but that's not you. And then to say that the thoughts that I'm aware of, even those, I am in possession of them, but I'm not that. That's a really daring statement. And if you think just purely in philosophical terms, forget even about experience. Purely in philosophical terms, you trace the thought traditions of the world. You will see basically, and Swami Vivekananda makes this point somewhere, that it's basically the same questions that are asked again and again. Philosophy around the world asks the same basic questions. What is this world? How do we understand things? What is knowledge? What is certainty? What is the goal of life? The questions that people ask are the same in all traditions. So that part is not unique. That is common in all traditions. What happens though is that in especially Western philosophy first, we stop at the following point, that when we ask, who am I? What is the individual? The answer of Western philosophers is, you are the mind. That's a fundamental tenet of Western philosophy. Who is the individual? The individual is the mind. And that's, from one point of view, it is understandable why you would say that. Because whereas I can see that the body is changing, so maybe I'm not the body, but you say, I know everything in and through the mind. How do I know this table exists? It's only my mental sensation. So therefore, it sounds like a very already exalted philosophical position to say, I am the mind. And so this Cartesian maxim, this is the starting point and sort of the bedrock of Western philosophy. And so, in the face of that, and actually, at least a millennium, maybe 2 millennium before that, for somebody to stand and dare to say, no, even thoughts are not. I'm not the thoughts. That's a pretty bold statement. And how one came to that point, that's a very interesting story. But it's a pretty bold statement to say, I'm not the thoughts. Already thoughts are something subtle. I can't touch them. Something ephemeral. And say, I'm even subtler than that. To root one's awareness, one's identity rather, in awareness, in consciousness, that's a big, bold step. And I don't believe it's happened in any other philosophical tradition, philosophical or spiritual tradition in the world, to say, I am consciousness. Who are you? I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, I am consciousness. To make that bold statement, even philosophically first, and then as a matter of spiritual experience, you won't find it in any other tradition. Somebody was pointing out the other day in a class that, you have mystics all over the world. Indeed you do. Meister Eckhart, made similar statements like that. But the point is, whereas you have isolated individuals, this is a mainstream philosophical tradition. If you were to posit this kind of statement, in the Western context, you will have a lot of justifying to do. But if you were to say this in an Indian context, even if I don't particularly take that as the focus of my sadhana, I'll understand it. I'll understand it and accept it as true. So that's a pretty big statement there already. But then Vedanta takes it one step further and says it's not enough for you to be aware of that. It's not even enough for you to have that mystical experience. You have to translate that into action. You see, so how and where did people think that the Indian philosophical tradition or the Indian spiritual tradition is otherworldly or unworldly? Where and when did people think that we don't give proper weight to the importance of the world, or that we think it's an illusion? It's a complete misunderstanding. This ideal has to be very clearly understood. The ideal, the goal is not even mukti. It's Jeevan Muktha, free while living. That in the light of that truth, that awareness, now act. So our ethics starts there. You see, it's interesting that the kind of problems the philosophers ask, epistemology, knowledge, ethics, how should we behave? Then they go to metaphysics and theology. These are the kind of questions, the general areas in which philosophers move. Our ethics comes after the question of identity. It's born from the fact, now I am consciousness, then what is the implications of that? Now that I'm conscious, why? Consciousness is indivisible. Consciousness is not, I have a consciousness, you have a consciousness, not like that. Consciousness is indivisible. If consciousness is indivisible, that has an ethical implication. Why? Because if my consciousness is the same as your consciousness, I am you and you are me. So then the question comes, how should I act? Well, I should act in a way that's best for me, which means it's best for you. Our idea of ethics is born from that highest realization, which again, unfortunately, some people think it's too esoteric, it's too abstract, it's not practical. This is nonsense, really, because from it is born the most fundamental of guiding philosophies, namely how should we act. Or ethics is born from that. So it is, as it is pathological to harm oneself, this kind of ethics says, therefore you should behave properly with others, because they are you and I am them. So that trend, that whole sequence of thoughts, that succession of thought is really, really beautiful. On top of that, Yoga adds one other dimension in the various darshanas, of Indian philosophy. Sankhya already said you are not body or mind, but yoga adds another thing that observes that and says, is there a discipline? Is there a discipline by which you can actually experience that? That's also a really remarkable thing. One more point I want to make is that think of this whole issue of how did people conceive even of the yoga disciplines. By the yoga disciplines, of course, I don't have to tell this audience. I mean, it's not. I don't mean the asanas and the exercises, but the yoga disciplines, the whole theory of mind. How could one have even conceived of that? You see, it starts from the whole Sankhya idea of concept of Purusha, and to say that, in Sankhya there is the idea that Prakriti and Purusha are separate. Prakriti is all that is some sort of proto-matter. All that we see as nature is derived from Prakriti. And Purusha is consciousness or awareness. And of course in Sankhya they keep it separate like that, Purusha and Prakriti, and there's no interaction between the two. By the presence of Purusha, all that is in Prakriti is animated. Nature functions because of the presence of Purusha. The important consequence of that, and I guess this is one theme I want to continue to emphasize, that when you take a philosophical position, it has practical consequences. Philosophical positions are not meant just for speculation. They have practical consequences, and tremendous practical consequences. In this case, since Sankhya says here is consciousness and everything else is in nature, mind is in nature. Mind is part of nature. This goes back to the idea, who am I? You see, I'm consciousness, but mind is part of nature. The implication of that is it's subject to law. Everything in nature is subject to law of cause and effect. Causation lives in nature, not outside. So, if mind is part of nature, it's subject to cause and effect, which means I can study it as I would study something in physical science. What does science do? It takes a physical phenomenon and then tries to find the laws that govern it. Matter and force and energy. You study the laws. And you formulate laws, and then you test those laws, and then you're pretty confident that nature is obliged to behave according to those laws, so confident that you make predictions according to it. You launch a spaceship in a certain way, confident that the gravity is going to work exactly this way and it's going to end up exactly where you want it. So physical universe, the physical matter is strictly subject to law. And that science is built on that. Now, to put mind in nature means mind is subject to the same kind of laws. Not exactly the laws of physical matter, but mind is subject to law because that's the nature of nature. And so you can study mind as a scientist. You can study mind as objectively as you would study physical matter. And it's because of that the whole of yoga developed. The whole idea of how do you concentrate, how do you meditate, what are the different layers that you go through, what are the experiences that you have, very forensically almost, Patanjali lays it all out. How is that possible? It's only possible when you realize this is something I'm studying, it's not me. It's something I'm studying. So that's that kind of brilliant idea. The whole business of yoga starts from the philosophical position that mind is a part of nature and I am not the mind. Therefore, I can study it objectively. And then yoga made the absolutely startling statement that mind actually can be stopped. And when you're stopped, what happens when mind is stopped? Well, if you believe you are the mind, then you're also stopped. You'd be eliminated. But in this model, what they say is when mind is stopped, you realize who you are. Who you are beyond the mind becomes revealed. And so there is a state of knowing knowledge beyond knowledge, so to speak. There's a state of experience beyond the mind. You don't die, you actually see who and what you are. So that whole process is so wonderfully laid out in yoga. And then, but it stops there. And then Vedanta picks it up and says, now there's an extra step. Having realized that, how should you live in this life? This concept of Jeevan Mukta comes in Vedanta.
So Kumar,
Yeah.
question. So doesn't that mean that consciousness or realization is not subject to any law?
It's not subject to law. Okay. And that's why now if you probe this, you will say the experience of consciousness cannot be caused. Cannot be caused. It's not that's the Holy Mother tells in a nice way. It's not like fruits and vegetables. I do this much japam, therefore I should realize God. It's not like that. Why? Because exactly this point. It's not subject to law. But what is subject to law is mind. Everything below that is subject to law. So therefore, don't tell me I'm not in a good mood. Sometimes I'm happy. I'm depressed. That's nonsense according to yoga, because all of that you can manipulate. All of just as if you say it's cold, then I'll turn the heat up. I'll bring the heater and it's too hot, I'll turn the air conditioning on. That easily, mind is subject to law. My mood is not good. Yoga says there's a discipline, there's a sadhana. You can put your mind in good shape. All of that is subject to law. What's not subject to law is consciousness. Consciousness is independent. It is outside of causation. But then, of course, the philosophers will raise all sorts of questions. They're all very interesting. That's why Shankara writes so much. But those are issues that come up when you try to probe, really, what does it mean? How can you have this apparent duality? Is it again the Sankhya duality? And Shankara has a really brilliant way of explaining that it's not a dualism. So this idea is we are consciousness, and then to bridge it all the way back, to deny multiplicity at first, and then to bring back that multiplicity and integrate it into one's experience, and to say Jeevan Mukta is the goal. Free while living. You move and you act and you behave, and how should you behave? You think the illumined soul is free, sometimes in the Kadamrita it comes, you act like a ghoul or an inert person. Let that be as it is, whatever meaning that has. It's irrelevant for us. I think for us the important thing is, how should I act? I should act in a most responsible way, in a most caring way, in a most unselfish way, inclusive way. That is the goal of the Jeevan Mukta. That is what we were taught in chapter 12 of the Gita also. Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahamkara samudukha sukakshami. That is the way a person of realization will act. So that is the Jeevan Mukta. That's what we're studying now in this thing. You see, it's interesting. Where does Vivekachudamani start? It starts from a disciple who asks the sort of the existential and epistemological question we've discussed many times in this class. You feel the frustration, the limit. There are things I want to know, I don't seem to be able to know. I can't understand. How do I break through that barrier and get the answers to the most pressing questions in my heart? That's where it starts. And remember the teacher first says, don't worry, ma bheshta vidwan. You don't be afraid. There is a way out. There is a way out. That's where he starts. And then you think he's going off into some abstract thing. He brings it right back and says, Jeevan Mukta is the goal. The how do we act? How do we see God with eyes open? So that's this whole chapter or whole section of Vivekachudamani that we're reading, hallmark of Jeevan Mukta. It started with verse 425. And by the way, you know that Vivekachudamani is Shankara's original composition, and in some sense, it's I think it's his best composition. Swami Vivekananda says that two books a monk should always be with: Gita and Vivekachudamani. This monk means all of us who take spiritual life seriously. We should constantly be referring to these books. And also, we're lucky as a direct disciple recorded some comments. But then you see, the point is, he being of an exalted state of mind, he's not going to give you a verse by verse. So some verses are missing. He only commented on some verses. It's okay. We can already learn from that. Okay, so let's look at verse 437. Vignata atmano yasya brahma bhava shruter balat Bhavavanda Vinirmukta Sajeevan Mukta Lakshanaha. This is 437. So this is the translation. By the way, just a word of warning, you should always be skeptical of translations, even by great people. You should always be skeptical of because everybody is translating with something in mind. Sri Ramakrishna, said, what is that? You Bengalis will know better. Cut the head and the tail. What is that expression? What is that expression?
What is that?
Cut the head and the tail. You take something like, I guess it must be an allusion to fish. He says, so even Sri Ramakrishna says something, take the essence, don't get bogged down in some detail. I think that's what he means. So what is the expression? Cut the head and the tail? Guys, those who know Bengali, you don't lose this, please.
That expression, the tail portion and the head portion, you just
remove it
and take the main part.
Yes, that's right. That's the way it should be.
Okay.
So look for the essence of what is being taught. Don't worry about details always. And also, Swami Saravatananda often used to say, everybody is a victim of their times and traditions. Everybody is a victim of their times and traditions. So it is. You can't help it. You will express yourself in the way that is suitable for your times and traditions. So if you're reading something that from some time ago, just bear that in mind. You have the same reverence and respect. I'm not saying you reduce that anything, but just bear in mind, be skeptical of translations. This is only temporary. We're reading the translation and understanding temporarily. When you get better knowledge, you go back and look at what the verse says. Guaranteed, if you do that, you'll get new insights. Guaranteed. Spiritual life, is all about self-discovery, but that self-discovery is not what you're only with when you're in meditation. Anything you read, anything you touch, anything you think about, you will have your own original way of saying things. Okay, so this verse translation is this. He who has known his own self by the power of the scriptures, who has become free from the bondage of the world, he is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this body. Okay, so note again, free even in this body. So Sri Ramakrishna does say, of course, that when you have that highest state of spiritual experience, the body can't stand it, cannot really hold it. So it will fall off in 21 days, he says. There seems to be some truth to that, even that number. But in spite of that, here he is talking about free even in the body while living. And there have been many illumined souls. Sri Ramakrishna himself is an example, but even not people who you would call an avatar Purusha. Lots of illumined people who they don't advertise, they don't announce. They're just like that. And I would say one of the first signs of spiritual progress is at least in some intuitive way to understand that and try to seek the company of such people, because they won't advertise themselves. So a sign that we are progressing is that we're able to we feel intuitively such and such a person they have some insight, and to seek their company and to be to try to benefit from that. Swami Saravaratana used to tell a story. He met many he himself, of course, was a illumined person, but he met many illumined people, and he used to say in Hardwar, Kankal, he told us about different great people, and one day he saw Swami Kalyananda, who was an illumined person, and another sage coming together. The sage lived in Hardwar. He wouldn't be in any ashram, he'd be only on his own. So everyone felt it an honor to serve him in some way if he would come to the ashram. So that day he was walking towards the ashram, and Swami saw these two people, they were going to cross paths. Said, something important is going to happen. They'll start discussing something, I could listen and learn. And they will come. They came near each other like this and walked down. That's all. There were no fireworks. So these people don't advertise. They are just like that. So we have to know, and then in their company, something will rub off. We will get, just as when you go to fire and sit nearby, you get warm. like that in proximity of realized souls, we also feel some insight and intuition. So he's a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this body. He who has known his own self by the power of the scriptures. See, these are not words. Scriptures are not words. They are the recording of illuminations, revelations. Now, you see the challenge that people are facing. You are trying to express the inexpressible. That which cannot be captured in words. Any word is a limitation. That which you cannot capture in word, you're trying to capture. And so, how do you do that? Well, if you and I try it, we will rack our brains to say, how do I say this? That's an intellectual process. That's not what this is. There is a space in which it is said that you get the expression comes. It is a limitation because it is an expression, and yet it's an enlightened limitation. The word itself is kind of luminous. You feel this when you read the Upanishads. The words are luminous. They're not ordinary words. Like in the
Vakyas, right?
Huh? Mahavakyas. But even in the Vedic hymns, darkness is covering darkness. He's trying to explain the original. Darkness is covering darkness. And Vivekananda also makes the point that extraordinary expression that.
Come, mother, come.
So the idea that you're trying to express the inexpressible, but not all words are the same. There are some words, some expressions which are more luminous. So when he says here, he who has known his own self by the power of the scriptures do have power. And you get it when you meditate on those words, on the meaning of those words, or the meaning of the meaning, then you realize that these are actually powerful expressions. So that's how mantras are born. Mantras are discovered, they're revelations. Mantras are born. So the Gayatri, for example, that we often chant, is attributed to Vishwamitra. It is revelation. So
These mantras can be, without intellectually understanding them, they still have the luminous power?
They do. The expressions are given. Aurobindo has some beautiful explanations of this. He says that when you think of word, its power is most manifest when the meaning becomes evident just by pronouncing the word. He gives the example of vrka. Vrka. Vrka is the old Sanskrit word for wolf. And vrka literally means one who tears. See, the vrka already has something is happening there. There is some, and he says that it's kind of a luminous word, because it reflects in itself the kind of experience somebody has when confronting a wolf. The terror, not the terror, the terror, the one who tears. And so words, even in our spoken languages, there is a hierarchy of words. We've become very functional. We say table. What is a table? Now I have to tell you what a table is. But is there a way of phrasing a word by which the meaning itself stands out? That is a higher order of words. Poets understand this. The poets understand this a lot because they're constantly bending language to make it do things it wasn't meant to do, to reveal meaning that it is not possible to reveal. They're constantly doing this. They also understand that use of rhyme, use of meter, all of these things are meant to bring out meaning from sound that may not be evident. When we speak, for example, our intonations, our amplification or modulation of our sound is also meant to bring out more meaning. Our gestures. Gesturing is a part of communication because some of the meaning is coming out there. So all of these things are attempt to express the inexpressible, to make language do what it wasn't intended to do. So there's the idea. So therefore, yes, powerful mantras are like that they will have an effect even if you don't consciously know the meaning. But some inner being will react to the meaning. So he who has known his own self by the power of the scriptures. So that doesn't mean I've read all of the scriptures. I remember in our Vedanta society, I was told, I wasn't there at that time, you guys used to have study groups, study circles, and used to study, and then somebody came and said, what do you do? Now we're studying the Chandogya Upanishad. Oh, Chandogya Upanishad. What about Brihadaranyaka Upanishad? Oh, we finished that. We finished that, meaning, yeah, it's true. In some sense, we went through it. But what he's saying is, when he says by the power of the scriptures, is not reading is important, studying is important, discussing is important, but try to get to the essence of what those words are. Make them alive, make them come alive. And by the way, when you come across people who are deep into anything, in some field even, they can make words come alive. Words that look dead to us, look static to us, lifeless to us, they can make it come alive. That's the power.
Swamiji did it so many times.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. The more you meditate, think deeply about something, the more you can make words come alive. And also the more effort we make to try to understand, the more they come alive. So when he says, he who has known his own self by the power of the scriptures have power. And so much power, it can help us to realize our own true nature. So he has known his own self by the power of the scriptures, who has become free from the bondage of the world. What's the bondage of the world? See, in what way does the world give us bondage? It is because if I'm content with limited views of things, then I'm led to limited conclusions. Buddha had a really beautiful expression. He said in the Eightfold Path, it is samyak drushti. Take the wholesome view. In Pali, it's sammaditi. Sammaditi and the foolish, I think its foolish translation is right vision or right seeing. It's not right, it's wholesome. Samyak. The Sanskrit is samyak drishti. Take the whole view, then you're not going to be misled. When you listen, try to take the whole sound. When you talk to somebody, try to take the big picture, then you won't be misled. If you take a partial picture, what happens is you'll reach a false conclusion. When we say the world is bonded or bondage of the world, it is this incorrect ideas that we have about things. So try to spread first, even if you don't want to look at any of this, even just in our interaction with the world, try to take the bigger picture, the bigger view, try to expand your mind in terms of the way you speak, the way you hear, the way you interact with people. Then you'll find it's less of a bondage. So here he says, who has become free from the bondage of the world. There are two ways that you can do that. One is to, as you discover your own nature, and also you try to understand others. Both together will help you to realize your own self and be free from the bondage of the world. He is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this body. That's 437. Okay, 438. Feel free to interrupt, by the way. The more we discuss, the more we understand better for us. We're not rushing through this. We're not trying to finish the book. Okay, so 438. Dehendriye swaham bhava idam bhava sadanyake yasya no bhavatah kvapi sa Jeevan Mukta ishyate. He who does not feel his identification with the body or senses or with any objects of the world, he is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this life. It's interesting. He who does not feel his identification with the body or senses or with any objects of the world. Okay? Be careful with the meaning of this. Identification with the body or I am the body. Person doesn't think like that. I am the senses. Especially the tongue. I am the tongue. The tongue is amongst the senses. Of course, sight is very powerful sense. But the tongue is also very powerful. That's why people say when you're trying to live a disciplined life, try to discipline the tongue. Tongue you discipline in several ways. First in terms of what you eat, but also more importantly, what you say.
What you speak.
Exactly. What you say. There's a saying that if you say the wrong word, you can't take it back. If you make a false step, you may fall down and break your ankle. It'll heal. But if you say the wrong word, how do you take it back? It's very hard. You still try, but very hard to heal. So the discipline of the tongue, for a yogi, the tongue is very important, both in terms of taste because of what we eat, but also what we speak. That's why you see many aspirants sometimes practice mauna. And then they also are very careful about their food. Why? It's not just because it's trying to it's not out of bravado. It's because really something changes. So it does have a transformative effect. So he who does not feel his identification with the body or senses or with any objects of the world, he is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this life. Now we have to be careful not to think therefore that he doesn't, such a person, he, by the way, take it generically, he or she. I actually like the Sanskrit word it. Meaning it includes all genders. He who does not feel his identification with the body or senses or with any objects of the world, you think then you don't care about anything. I don't need to care about the world. I don't need to care about it's not that. You see, when I see you, I do care about you. But I'm seeing you not as a body, as a mind or as an object, but as pure consciousness, living being. And therefore my respect for you goes all the more. My love for you goes all the more when I see you as an embodiment of spirit.
Actually, there was a conversation whereby my mama said that about Swami Ranganathan.
Mm-hmm.
So he used to talk with the devotees, but next time he meets the same devotee, it was a clean slate. He won't keep any of these interaction in his mind.
Yeah. He is quite an extraordinary individual, certainly. Both you had to see him both publicly and privately, very inspiring person in many ways. Very inspiring. And he, as you say, he was able to. I think he was clearly trying to see the spiritual embodiment. Everyone and everything as spiritual embodiment. See, also interesting thing is that as we progress in spiritual life, in some sense, we have to write our own rules. The rules, the way people think about or follow, you find they require modification. Not because you disrespect those rules, but you're growing. Those were written at a certain time. You're growing. So, for example, he used to say sometimes his japam, his meditation is correcting the proof sheets. He's working on a book. His lectures have been transcribed. There's a deadline with the publisher, and he says, my shrine is here. The proof sheets, I have to correct them and I have to get them to the press. So that shows you, the point is, you say, well, but now, not that we should imitate that. Not that we should. That comes at a certain stage. At another stage, you absolutely must have regularity. You must do your japam in a certain way. But the point is that as we progress, the interpretation of what is spiritual discipline, what is spiritual life, that you have to constantly examine and readjust according to the circumstances. So he was like that.
And also, I think at that state, your secular and spiritual are all become same.
Exactly. It's not secular.
You don't see any difference.
Exactly. What do you see in that? That these words are firstly real, powerful words, but on top of that, the sooner we can get them in the hands of people, it'll help them. That compassion is also there. So it's a different point of view. But seeing that is inspiring, and we can try to incorporate that into our own life. We don't imitate, but we try to. So he doesn't feel his identification with the body or senses or with any objects of the world, but it doesn't mean one becomes an unfeeling, uncaring person. It means you see people and things in a different way, actually in a much more respectful way, much more endearing way, and much more real way. He is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this life. Okay, I think we can do one more verse, 439. Na pratyag brahmanor bedam kadapi brahma sargayoho pragnayayo vijanati sajivan mukta lakshanaha. he that knows no difference between the world and Brahman in his real consciousness, he is a Jeevan Mukta, free even. The world has become transformed. As you're saying, world has become transformed. This business, you're right, we make divisions, Now I'm being religious. I finished my religion, now I get on with my life. This is the way we think. We dress up in our Sunday best and go to the church, and then my religious duty is over. This division is not going to lead to growth. When we really start growing, will cover the whole of our life. See, the point of religion is religious practice is transformation. There has to be transformation. We are becoming transformed into our ideal. And so the more we make progress in that, the more divisions will be eliminated. So here he knows no difference between the world and Brahman in his real consciousness. He is a Jeevan Mukta, free even in this life. So again, it's not to bring down Brahman to the level of the world. It's to raise the world to the level of Brahman. This is the point, because sometimes people also say, I've heard people say like this is my meditation. And it's nonsense. The person is not practicing anything, is not at any level. Better you drop what you're doing and go to the shrine room. You'll be benefited. So we shouldn't fool ourselves either. This is my meditation. What are you really doing? It's actually your attachment. So when he says there's no difference between the world and Brahman, it means the world is uplifted to Brahman, not Brahman brought down to the world. So that then you start seeing people in a different way, things also in a different way. You remember in Holy Mother's household, sometimes somebody the broom. Somebody swept the floor and then threw the broom in the corner because the job is done. He said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Mother, I finished working with the broom." He said, "No, that broom is also part of our household. Treat it carefully." Treat it with respect, yeah. And then somebody was playing with a cat. And they put their foot on the head of the cat. He said, "Why? Remove that. Salute the cat." He says, "Don't disrespect." Therefore, our interaction with the world changes in the light of the spiritual ideal, the light of our spiritual awareness. Our interaction changes. So we speak differently. We talk. We act differently. We think differently. We react differently. Haven't you noticed spiritual people, it's hard for them to see something is wrong. Somebody saying something wrong, they interpret it in a different way. Actually, at that point, it's best to keep our mouth shut and try to see, can I get that point of view? They see things, they turn it into a positive way. And then, here's the other thing. Not only do they turn it into a positive way, if you follow that, and we who are sympathetic to that, who observe that, they'll turn our mind to. But even more powerfully, to the other person who's not sympathetic to it, they can turn their mind to. That is the greatest thing, transformation of myself, transformation of those who are friendly to me, but transformation of those who are not friendly to me. That's the spiritual power. So, the Jeevan Mukta, you see, there's no difference between the world and Brahman in their real consciousness, but because they've uplifted everything into a spiritual awareness, and in the company of such a person, we will also feel that. This is the meaning of the verse in Isha Upanishad, the first verse. Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam. Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam. Yat Kincha Jagat Jam. We were talking about the way these words are stated. Why does he need to say that second line? Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam. He said it already. The spiritual force dwells in all of this. Isha dwells in all of this. I'm done. What you want to say, you're done. But no, you're not done. Because if you can see that intensely, you say, even in the very minutest portion, yet kincha, everywhere it is pulsating. The spiritual presence is pulsating even in the minutest portion. And then, of course, there is that magnificent statement in the Isha Upanishad that comes next that many people seem to overlook. The very next thing, Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Chaktena Punjita. Tena Chaktena. Tena Chaktena means With my tiny bit of Sanskrit, I can tell you that vibhakti, tena means by that. Tat is that, tena means by that. Tyaktena, it requires the same vibhakti as that. So, tat tyakta, that means that renunciation, means tat tyakta. Tena tyaktena means by that renunciation. So I make a big deal of this, because it's not in many books. This is pointed out in only one translation, the one we had at Old Smoky. It is not in any other book. Please understand what this is saying. Tatyakta means that renunciation. Tena tyaktena means by that renunciation. Why is that so important? Because the Rishi has only said 2 lines so far. Isha vashyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. The spiritual force dwells in all this, even in the minutest portion. By that renunciation, and then some other things come. That means, you see, the Rishi has defined renunciation. The Rishi is right there in those 2 lines, is defining renunciation. What is it? Isha vashyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. That spiritual awareness, that the ruling force, the spiritual force dwells in all of this.